Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Fox. I am the creator of Project Waifur, the card game, and here in this video I will be explaining on how to play the game, the rules, and everything you need to get started. So yeah, let's just begin. Let's quickly go over the requirements on what we need to play the game. Project Waifur is a two-player card game similar to TCG, such as Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon TCG, or Cardfight Vanguard. That means we need two players, each with their own personal deck, consisting of a total of 50 free cards, or how I like to call it, a 50 plus free card deck, as the main deck has 50 cards, and you also have free cards, level 1 character cards, which are your starting Waifur, so it's 50 plus free cards. Now, you need free character cards at level 1, which are separate from the main deck, and you also need a main deck, which consists of 50 cards total, not more, not less. Make sure you don't exceed the maximum playset. A playset is on how many copies of a card you can have inside your deck. The playsets for all level 1 and 2 cards is 4, and the playset / limitation for level 3 cards is 1 per card per deck. And your main deck, you have the program cards as well as the character cards. However, you usually do not put level 1 character cards into your main deck. It's only the level 2 and level 3 versions. You can add level 1 cards to your deck. However, it's not required to play. They are separate, and you just add 3 of those as your starting characters. To build your personal deck, simply combine 3 or more character packs. And these character packs contain all cards belonging to said character in full playset. There are no booster packs, there are no trial decks or pre-built decks available. All cards of the entire game can be combined, and everything functions in every deck. A playmat is not required, however very useful as it shows all the zones where the cards go. Official playmats, as well as free downloads of PDF versions for print, will be available at a later date. Also, optionally, in the game you are required to count damage points. Programs as well as characters will take damage throughout the gameplay. And to do that, you can either use pen and paper, or not a requirement, but a very good option is having a set of dice you can use. Additionally, I like to use a second set of differently colored dice, just a couple. These are great for card effects or counting certain effects and abilities that require you to put markers on them, as well as stacks. And as a final option, I like using a 12-sided die, simply as a turn counter. And with that is all we need to play the game. 2 decks, 2 players, dice optionally, more dice optionally, turn counter die optionally, and a playmat optionally. Now let's talk about the playing field and field zones, starting from right to left. So first off, we have the deck folder or deck zone, where your main deck goes face down. Next up, we have the score zone. This is where your score cards are located. Basically, your player hit points or health points. If these are depleted and you take 1 more score damage, you lose the game. They are normally placed in face down position and have always to be visible on how many there are left. Now, whenever I say normally, I mean that is the standard ruling for how to place the cards, as in face down. However, card effects might allow you to place the cards as face up as well. Next up, we have the main playing area, the main zone, which is the entire center here, containing all the Waifur, cache, charge, and program zones. All of these are interconnected. However, they are also split into separate character zones or character areas, which all equally have the Waifur, cache, charge, and program zones. So we have 3 of these. each representing a character. Now, starting off with the Waifur zones, this is where the characters are located, the character cards. And they are a little bit higher on the official playmats because throughout gameplay you may upgrade your characters, which in the end will look something like this. Then we have the cache zones. Each character has her own cache zone. This is where, kind of like, let's say, removed from play cards go. And if for some reason you have to place cards in cache, simply place them face down beneath or below your character, like this. You may also place them a little to the side to make it visible that there are cards there, or even horizontally if you want to, as long as the cards are beneath your character. And like I said, each character has their own zone there, so they may have separate cards in cache of their own. Next up we have the charge zones. Charge is the resource, your main resource in the game. Each character has their own charge zone, and charge is how you pay for downloading and installing cards, as well as using some card effects, and even canceling your opponent from activating their cards. Now, throughout gameplay, a lot of cards will always move in and out of charge. So you'll have at some point a lot of cards in this charge zone, a couple of cards in this charge zone, maybe some here, maybe not. It will be always different. Cards in charge are always normally placed as face down and will always be placed horizontally below the character card. And finally, on the bottom below the charge cards, we have the program zones, which is where all your installed programs go. So let's just imagine we have a couple installed here. So, okay, Ram has this one, the sword, and we have these two here installed to Wicked. Now, you can place them kind of like you want to. You can do it like this, or like this, doesn't matter. As long as, again, it is clear on which character has which card. So, you're not allowed to do something like this. Again, right? And finally, we have the left side of the field, which is called, the entire area is called the cooldown zone, which is kind of sort of your discard pile or graveyard zone. And this is where all the cards go that are destroyed, deleted, how it's called in this game, or even discarded. And the cooldown zone is split into 4 segments, which is cooldown 4, 3, 2, and 1. And like I said, throughout play, you'll have some cards in here. And just make sure it's clear on which cooldown zone they are on. Now, cards that are deleted or discarded are normally sent to cooldown free. So if this program was deleted, it would go to cooldown free. If Lasagna here was paying a card from cache for some effect or something, it would go to cooldown free. Cards are always normally placed face down into cooldown. Cooldown 4, however, is not accessible unless through card effects, as, like I said, all cards that leave the field would normally go into cooldown free. As for which cards are accessible to look at for either player, briefly, as we mentioned earlier, the deck as well as the score zone are inaccessible, so you and your opponent are not allowed to look at the face down cards in these zones. If a card effect tells you to look at them, of course, that is allowed. If a card effect tells you to search your deck for certain cards, you're allowed to do that. Always make sure to shuffle your deck afterwards. As for the rest of the field, both players are always allowed to look at their face-down cards, no matter which zone they are, right? However, your opponent is not allowed to look at your face-down cards. Your opponent may always, however, inquire information about your face-up cards. So if your opponent wants to know on what this card can do, since it is already face-up on your field, you are required to explain the card. One more thing you and your opponent are always allowed to ask and inquire on is on how many cards are in which zone. So if you or your opponent wants to know on how many cards are in your deck, you are always allowed to simply count. Same goes, of course, for cash, charge, or cooldown zones. Now let's talk about the actual cards of the game. There is two major categories of cards. We have the Waifur/character cards right here, and we have the program cards. The program cards also have several different types within them. So let's take a peek at the character cards first. So as you can see, we have the portrait of the character in the middle. We have the name of the character on the side, on the right side. Top left, there is the card level. This is the same for programs and Waifur character cards. Now, the character cards have HP, which stands for health points / hit points, whatever you want to call it. We also have the megabytes, the total megabytes of this card. Basically, the megabytes, the amount of programs she can install. We also have these icons on the bottom, which represent the card mastery, whatever cards this character has mastered. Every card in the game can install and use every card, every program available. However, characters with mastery are more efficient, therefore can use these cards for a cheaper price. We will be talking about that in a second. Now, as for levels, as you can see, we got level 2 and level 3 character cards. The level 2 and 3, they are very similar, however, they get increased stats over time. When you upgrade your character throughout gameplay, you notice the HP and megabytes go up, as well as adding new masteries, which is why we're holding this like this. As we play the game, they are placed on the field like that. Character cards also, they are not really color-coded. This one's blue, this one's orange, but this is because the characters themselves have 3 major colors, which is number 1, the black for their inner suit. We also have the outer armor / suit, which is a primary color, and we also have a so-called energy color, which is their hair, their eyes, as well as anything that is energy. For Lasagna's example here, we have her green armor or clothing, we have the black, of course, and we have the energy color being orange. And the card design of the character cards is just based around the character's energy color. The programs, however, are a little bit different. The programs is where all the card effects are. Now, as you can see here, we got different colors. These are, however, not color-coded after the characters. Instead, they are color-coded after the card type. We're gonna show that off in a second. Now, programs. Program cards always have the icon at the top, which, like I said, can be or are also available on the character cards for mastery. We also have the level, just as the character cards do. We have where the character cards would have HP and megabytes. The program cards have program points, short PP, and megabytes. The program points and HP work similar, as that is the damage the card can take. If a card takes damage and damage is equal to or greater than the hit points, or in this case program points, the card is then therefore deleted. As for the megabytes, this is very simple. The character cards have their maximum megabyte they can store in programs, while the program's megabytes is how much they cost. So if you want to install this program to this character, it will cost her 20 of her 60 megabytes, meaning she can store up to 3 of these at once. Other programs might have different prices, so if she wanted to use a Zap Cloak, she can only have 2 of those active at a time. And as you level up your characters, they will have more megabytes, therefore can store more programs. We also have on the top right, we have the cost of the card. This cost is split into 2 values. We have the base, I hope you can read this, base and extra cost, 1 plus 1. This means the total cost of this card is 2. We will go into how to pay cost in a bit. However, the reason this is split is because of the mastery system. If a character you want to install a program to has said mastery, then the extra cost, the second number, becomes 0. Therefore, this card is cheaper to use for the appropriate character. Every character can use and install every program in the game. However, working with Mastery makes it easier and cheaper to do. So, total cost would be 2 for this card. If Mastery, total cost would only be 1. There's also some cards that have other values here, of course. This card would be a total cost of 4. If Mastery, only 2. If we have a card like this one, it would be total cost of 1. If Mastery, it would be for free. Next up, we got the critical and power values, short crit and PWR. These are only available on the cards that actually have an attack command, which is seen right here. And it's pretty simple. During combat, we will explain the exact rules later on. If a card deals damage to a Waifur by attack, then the character will take damage equal to the critical damage. So this is basically the damage the character takes, while the power is the damage a program takes. So critical damage against characters, power damage or program damage against programs. That's why we split HP and PP. Of course, we have the name of the card, of the program right here. Above the program, there's a little space. Some cards may have extra little text here with some icons. These are card-specific effect card tags. Technically, these are also can also be standing in this first line here, just like the reversal written right here in full color. But these are specifically above the name because these have special effects, which we will be going into later on. Now, the first line of the text area here. The first line is always the type line. This is where we can see the card type. And the first thing we can see is this curly bracket, or the curly brackets with the name of the type. This one's saying weapon. So the card colors, as I mentioned earlier, the color coding is equal to the card type. So weapon is purple. We also have like support being blue. We have virus cards being red, constructs being gray, and skill cards being green. There is also more, but in general, all these cards function almost the same. The only exclusion to the rule is the green ones, the skill cards, as these do not have megabytes or program points. This is because these are like quick use, one-time use cards, and because they don't have program points and megabytes, that means two things. Number one, you can install an unlimited amount of these cards at once, as they do not use up any of the megabyte space. But it also means that since they don't have program points, they cannot take damage, but however, they will delete themselves after use. So if you use a card of these skill types, you can use all their effects, and afterwards it deletes itself. While the other cards can stay on the field until their damage reaches their program points. After the weapon type, there may or may not be a slash with another box tag and a text in between. Like here it says melee. If these are white or dual colored, like for example here we got static in yellow with different colored brackets, then this means these are simple tags. These are called card tags. And any of these card tags, the only meaning they don't have card effects. It's for other card effects to recognize these cards for specific conditions. They are only used for conditions. So if a card effect, for example, states 2+ cards with static face up in cooldown, that's where these come into play. They are for conditions. And these card effects here, these special little names here, remote, for example, which have card effects, these are technically also box bracket names that could be standing here. And they are also card tags, however, with effects. Going into detail on these later. Now, and finally, we have the actual effect text areas, which is below the first line. There can be multiple of these. Each card can have multiple effects. Each effect is headed by a backslash with a certain color. There you can have either a single green backslash, two blue backslash, or triple red backslash. The difference here being the simple green one is a so-called manual effect. Therefore, the player has to manually call out to use this card effect. For the blue ones being automatic ones, they will automatically trigger if the condition is met. Conditions always being written within these round-shaped brackets, like right here. We have the blue one, then we got targeted by attack. This is a condition. Green ones can also have conditions. And red ones are also called global effects. They are the same as the automatic ones, with one difference. The green and the blue ones can only be used if the card is installed and enabled. However, the red ones will always trigger as long as the condition is met, no matter what, even if the card is still in your hand or somewhere else on the field or disabled, like mentioned before. So red ones are just simply globally available effects. Like, for example, here, deleted. If this card is deleted, send it to cooldown as face up. That is a global effect, as it will trigger even when this card is deleted. So that's pretty much everything about the cards. Now, within some of the card effects, like this one, we have attack melee here. They are surrounded by angled brackets. These angled brackets, all that means is this is a card effect with more text, and it's called a common card effect. So basically, these are keywords for specific effects that a lot of cards have. You can find the exact rulings on the ruling cards or on the website. So attack just does a thing. Attack itself is a card effect in this game, and yeah, that's pretty much that. To set up a game, both players have their 50 plus free cards decks prepared. Then search their decks for free level 1 Waifur character cards. Put them aside for now. Then both players have their 50 cards main deck shuffled, way more than what I am doing right now, and then placed on face down on the deck folder zone. Both players then select one of their character cards to be their leader for this game, which is then placed face down into Waifur, the center Waifur zone. The other cards go onto the side Waifur zones in face down as well. Then both players take the top 5 cards from their respective decks and place them into their score zones face down. Always make sure that the cards in score zones are always visible on how many there are left. Then both players draw free cards from their decks into their hands. Next up, before we can actually begin the game, both players have to decide on who goes first. You can use a dice roll or something to decide. Then when the game actually begins, both players at the same time reveal and summon their leader, Waifur. And then the game begins. Playing a game of Project Waifur will lead you through several phases per turn. The phases are turn start, cooldown phase, draw phase, update phase, charge phase, action phase, and turn end. Now, most of these phases are really short and really simple to explain, with the action phase being where, well, most of the action and actual gameplay happens. And I will be going through each of these phases to explain to you how they work, and afterwards you will know how to play Project Waifur. Starting off with turn start. Now, turn start is simply the beginning of a turn. However, there's more to it. There's one thing that happens in turn start for both players actually, which is enabling all their programs. Now, during gameplay, you'll be installing programs to your characters, and programs have 2 states. State number 1 is the vertical state, which is enabled, and then state number 2 is the horizontal state, which is called disabled. We'll go into what these mean later on. However, during turn start, either player's turn start, both players enable all their cards that are currently disabled. The player to go first, however, player 1 basically, has to skip their very first turn's cooldown phase draw phase, and update phase. We're going to go into all these phases one by one now, but these three, the very first three phases, cooldown, draw, and update, player 1 needs to skip during turn 1. Next up is the so-called cooldown phase. This is before the draw phase. Now, during gameplay, cards will be placed into your cooldown, which is your kind of like discard pile. Now let's just imagine there are a couple of cards here in cooldown right now. Now, whenever a cooldown zone happens, or whenever a player goes into cooldown, there are a couple of things that happen. Number one, all cards from cooldown 1 are sent directly into your hand. This is called escalation, and basically how many cards ever are escalated, this is called an escalation 2, as 2 cards are escalated. Now, this specific wording, the escalation, is only required for a couple of rare card effects. But yes, so cooldown 1, all cards to hand. Next up, all cards from cooldown 2 move to cooldown 1. Then all cards from cooldown 3 move to cooldown 2. And if there are any cards in cooldown 4, they are moved to cooldown 3. This creates a cooldown, so-called cooldown rotation, and that is basically your main resource income later in the game. Following the cooldown phase, we are now in the draw phase. In the draw phase, we draw cards. You always get one draw, which you have to do. There's one mandatory draw. You draw a top card from your deck into your hand. However, in this game, in Project Waifur, you can draw more than one card. How to do that? During gameplay, you will be activating more characters, and you will also be charging cards. Just imagine we already have a couple of cards here, right? So after your mandatory draw, you may draw additional cards, one per each character, if the character can discharge one card. So we already did our one draw, and now I'm going to do another draw with Wicked, activating her, putting one of her charge cards into cooldown 3, and then therefore drawing one more card. I can do this with each character once per turn. So now Ram can do it once too, and Lasagna can do it as well. You cannot do multiple bonus draws per character. It's one per character. So that also means if you only have one character, which has then charges, during that turn you would only be able to draw once and then do one bonus draw with that character. Next we have the update phase, and during the update phase you can do one of two things. Number one, you may choose to select a face down character card on the board on your side of the field and flip her face up, therefore activating her. This action is called a summon. Your first priority should usually be to get all your characters ready. So if you still have a face down character, you might want to summon first before doing the other option. The other option being a so-called upgrade. You may, instead of summoning, let's just imagine we still have like this or whatever. Instead of summoning, you may select a character card from your hand. This is my hand right now. And that is one level above a character on the field. And then upgrade the character on the field with the new card. There is one restriction here, or rather two. Number one, it has to be one level above the card you want to upgrade. And number two, the character has to have the same name. Therefore, we are now upgrading Ram, for example. You place a card that upgrades like this, and you basically replace all the values, the level, the name, the hit points and megabytes. However, you add to the mastery. Now, next up, we can also do a little option here, which is called the cross upgrade. If you, for some reason, want to upgrade a character but do not have the right named character in your hand, you may also ignore the same name restriction by paying a little cost. And how to do this? You have to first you have to announce you want to do a cross upgrade, and then you pick and select a card from your hand, any card, and then you place this card into cache of the character you want to upgrade. So let's say we want to upgrade lasagna here. Place a card from hand to cache, and then now we can cross upgrade without the restriction of the same name. This allows for several different strategies involving mastery. And there is no limit to how many characters have the same name on the field. Only with the cross upgrades, of course, you will have to build your deck accordingly. Throughout gameplay, of course, you will have all your characters activated over time. You will have all your upgrades going, and it might look something like this. So, yes, summon or upgrade. This is what you can do during your update phase. And now we have entered the charge phase. This is, next to the action phase, pretty much, I would say, or consider the most important phase. It's also a phase where you actually will be doing a little more planning ahead than just simply placing cards, which, generally put, is the only thing you do here. So, during the charge phase, simply put, let me just do this here. During the charge phase, you may place any amount of cards from your hand into your character's charge zones. Now you can go like, okay, I want her to have one charge, her to have one charge, give her one, I'll give her another, and I want to keep this one for my turn, for example. That's how you do the charge phase, and that's pretty much all you do during the charge phase. However, there is a little more thought you have to put into doing this, as charges are not only used to pay for your card cost, but also to do some other actions like canceling your opponent's cards, which I will be explaining during the next phase, as well as what we already talked about, doing the extra draws during your draw phase, which is before the charge phase. Therefore, as a little pro tip here, make sure to always give each character a charge, at least during the early turns, maybe up to turn 6, and then try to keep these charges throughout your turn as well as over your opponent's turn, to then next turn, during your next draw phase, get the extra draws, because they need to survive both turns. And yeah, so whatever else you want to do, just make sure you have enough cost to pay. So for example, lasagna here, if I want to play this card during my action phase, I know she has the mastery, which makes it a little cheaper, but I still have to pay one card. Now I did charge her one, which I want to use for the draw, so I'll have to make sure that she has another card in charge, so therefore I can activate this card and also get my draw next turn. And that's how you do a successful charge phase. Also, if this is your very first turn, let's say you're going first, I advise you to just simply charge all of them to your character in your first turn. And now it's time to get into the action phase. Now, during the action phase, pretty much all the combat, all the installations and everything happens. You go into your action phase right after the charge phase, and during your charge phase, that is where you should make sure that you charge accordingly to be able to pay for your cost during the action phase. And I will now explain on how to install cards, programs, use programs, activate programs, and what else you can also do, as well as what your opponent can do during your turn. Now, let's just talk about installing cards first. So, you select a program card from your hand, and then you do a download action. So basically, it's my turn right now. I call out, okay, I want to download a program from my hand to RAM. Therefore, I place this program into the program zone, face up, and then I pay the cost. Now, the cost, as we already talked about, is determined by the cost on top right, with the second number disappearing, becoming 0, if the character has the corresponding mastery, the same icon. And therefore, RAM right here gets to play this card for free. if I were to install this to Lasagna, for example, who does not have the mastery of this specific card, she can still install it. However, I would have to pay the cost from my charge into cooldown free, as all cards go to cooldown free, leaving the field. So now we have installed our program basically, and during your action phase you can now do as many downloads as you want to. You can also do as many card effects as you want to, and there is no order. So you can download card effect, attack. Attacking this game is technically a card effect. And then do another download, another attack, or do all your downloads first and then do the attacks. That is your strategy to choose. Now, this action of downloading a card, it's called download because it's separate from installing. So download, pay the cost, and then the card is installed. And as soon as the card is installed, all the manual card effects may be activated. All the automatic card effects with the double blue, like this here, also activate, while of course the card effects with the global, the triple, are always active. Now, cards have two states. The vertical state, like this one here, is called the active, enabled state, and cards that are enabled, they usually come as enabled on the field and can use their card effects. However, if a card is disabled for some reason, all the manual and automatic card effects no longer function. The global ones still do, however. Some card effects might disable the card after use, and as we already know, during the turn start, both players may enable all their cards. There is one thing your opponents can actually do during your downloads. Whenever you download a card, that is step 1, you also have to step 2 pay the cost, and then step 3, before the card is installed, your opponent may actually do a cancel action. To do this, your opponent must call out and cancel, and then they have to choose one of their characters that has charge, and that character may now cancel the installation. You do this by having the character pay the full cost. Let's just say, for example, your opponent chooses to use Pyra for this. Pyra now has to pay the full cost of the card that is to be installed, being 1. In this case, mastery does not matter. So Pyra may now pay 1 card, which of course goes to cooldown free on their side now, and therefore your card is now cancelled and instantly deleted before being installed. Now, the cancel mechanic is limited to once per turn per character, so each character may only cancel once per turn. And also, there's one more limitation. Whenever you download a card, characters can only download programs that are of their level or below. So Ram right here as level 2 may download this card as well. However, Wicked, for example, cannot download this level 2 Double Saber card. All of them can do the level 1, of course. And Lasagna here is level 3, so she can do pretty much anything. The canceling is the same rule. So if Ram were to download a Double Saber in this case, which has a 1+1 total cost, let's see, she has the mastery, that's what you check, so the second number becomes 0, therefore she has to pay 1, and now your opponent may cancel. The opponent cannot use Pyra or even Mikune in this case for canceling, as they are not level 2 or above. So in this case, Memory is the only one to cancel if she wanted to, and she would have to pay the full cost, which is 2. So she could do this, and therefore this card is now cancelled. Of course, Memory can no longer cancel during this entire turn. Now, both players can cancel during either player's turn, and yes, this also means your opponent can install cards, or rather download cards, during your turn. However, this is limited to what is called the reversal, right here. Cards with reversal can be downloaded during your opponent's turn, and they can also be downloaded as a kind of a quick effect during another effect, which will put them in front of the other effect's activation then. This is what reversal does. And since we're on the topic of card effects or card rules that apply during download, there is one more we need to talk about real quick, which is the remote tag. Now, above the name we have some card tags. In the final version, these will also have the box brackets. I will add those to make it more clear that these are also tags. However, these tags above the name have actual mini card effects. And as we already explained, reversal will allow you to download this card even during your opponent's turn or as a quick effect. Now, remote and reversal both have the same color. This is because both of these interact with the download command. Remote, however, is a little different, as that remote, first of all, it's only useful if the character that downloads the card also has the mastery. So let's just check. Wicked here has the mastery, so I will now download this card to Wicked. Now I have to pay the cost, which is 1 + 1. Through mastery, it becomes only 1. Wicked pays the cost. And now I usually would be installing the card. However, with remote, we can now choose to install this card to any of our characters. Of course, when installing cards, always make sure the maximum megabytes of all your programs does not exceed the character's megabytes. So Wicked with remote now installs this to Lasagna, for example. And this remote basically allows you to, if you have a character with the mastery, install the programs cheaper to other characters. That's the only thing remote does, but it is very useful in some situations. Another small information about the canceling. Canceling always happens right after paying the cost. Download, pay the cost, cancel. Which means the opponent does not need to know if or to whom you install the card afterwards with remote. That is a choice you make after your opponent decides to cancel or not. And now we have to talk about card effects. For activating card effects, we can only activate the manual card effects with the green one simple slash. The blue ones, double blue is automatic. Those automatically function as soon as the requirement is met, as well as the triple global. Those are also automatic. Therefore, we only can activate manually these manual card effects. Now, card effects, there is of course the general card effects that have text, but we also have some card effects which are just simply a word or two with these arrow tags right here, like attack is. And these are called common card effects or common actions. This is because these are usually card text, like any other card effect would have. However, they are very commonly used by many cards, therefore I have shortened them into these little tags here. And I'm going to put up the actual command for attack right on the screen somewhere for you to read if you like, but I will also explain what attack does. So if you have a card that has an attack command, you can activate this as you would any other card effect that is manual by calling out, I want to activate a card effect, which is now this attack. I want to attack with this card. And now we go into the actual effect. Select our weapon or card to attack, then we select a target, one of the enemy characters. For this example, let's just attack the one in the center. We got memory right there. And now the opponent may use a quick effect, depending on how card effects work with their text. For example, if memory had this card installed, it says automatically targeted by attack, and then this effect happens, deal damage. Right? So this is an automatic effect, and it happens the moment we do our targeting. So that means if we were to target her and she had this card effect would trigger and happen first before the rest of the attack. So that's one thing. Other than that, the opponent may also now download cards programs with the reversal. So let's go with dodge right here. So if we attack and the opponent decides to install a dodge to memory, they can now do this. They have to, of course, pay the cost. Memory does not have mastery for this, so the cost would be 1. But yeah, after installation, targeted by attack, this condition is still met, as we are still targeting the attack, and then the attack does not hit this target. Therefore, our attack would miss and not deal damage. We'll go into damage calculation in a second. As for this, it says targeted by attack. Now, there is 2 versions of the attack, which is /melee and /ranged. If a card effect just refers to simple attack, this is both versions. If a card effect refers to one of the specific ones, for example /ranged, then therefore this would not count, as this is a melee version. But simply attack refers to both versions. The opponent does not do anything in this case, we attack, and the attack hits. So what happens? We take some damage dice here, and the first thing that happens is we deal critical damage equal to crit, which is 2, to the character. And now, after that, if the character survives, we deal power damage, which is 4 in this case, to one of her installed programs. She's got those 2 guns back there, both have 7 program points, and now I can, as the attacker, I can choose which one to deal damage to. I will choose that one right there. If our attack deals enough damage to be equal to or higher than the program points of the program would be deleted. If our attack, however, deals enough crit to deal equal to a total of equal to or greater than the opponent's hit points, then the character would be deleted, and you do not need to do the extra power damage calculation with the programs, because when a character is deleted, you remove all attached cards to that character. Every single card they have. The upgrades, the charges, the cash, and all installed programs, and you place all of them into cooldown free. Only the level 1 character card is then placed back to face down position. This is called a character deletion. And yes, during the update phase we already talked about, your opponent may once again summon their character back. Also, if you delete a character, you deal damage to the opponent's score. The score damage is equal to the character's maximum level she had at the point of deletion. In this case, it was 2 plus 1. So 2 plus 1 equals free, and your opponent now takes free of their score cards into their hand. If you were attacked, let's go with Lasagna right here. So Lasagna is attacked and deleted because enough damage was dealt. All her attached cards, including the cash, are now deleted and sent to your cooldown. And you take score damage equal to her maximum level at the point of deletion, which was free, plus 1. So it's 4. Which is a lot of damage if the character was already level 3. And those go straight into your hand, right? Which also means you can do reversal cards if you have defensive cards. It's like a comeback mechanic if you want. And the final thing these attack commands do is after the attack, they deactivate, or rather disable, that's the correct wording, the program. And now let's just quickly go over some modifiers for those attacks. There are 3 modifiers for attacking. It is super simple, really. Let's just start off with shield. You may have a character may have cards installed that have shield. It looks like this. There's also some card effects that give a card or your character a shield, which would then be written in text like this: 1 times shield. And here it would just look like this: 1 times shield, with brackets in the final version of the game. But yeah, anyway, that's how you gain shield. And the reason there's a number is because shield can stack. If you have multiple cards that have shield on your character, they accumulate. And let's say you have 2 of these installed, that would mean that character has 2 shield. What does shield do? It's very simple. Shield reduces the critical damage, only the critical, of incoming enemy attacks. Strictly attacks. So if you deal damage through a card effect, like this one for example, that is not an attack, then this will not be reduced by shield. This only reduces incoming attack critical damage. And even if you deal 0 critical damage to a character, you will still deal the power damage to program damage to a program. That's what shield does. We also have 2 more things, which is the priority and the hidden. So what these do is they change on how damaging works to programs. Very simple once again. If a program with priority is installed to a character, and this character is attacked and takes damage, programs without priority cannot take damage from an attack. Once again, specifically attack effects. So other card effects may still deal damage. And it doesn't change on how you choose your targeting. So if the opponent's character has, let's say, 5 cards, 5 programs installed, you as the attacker may still choose which program takes the damage. However, if that program does not have priority and another program is installed with priority, that program you chose will not take damage. So you have to get rid of the priority cards first. And the other is called hidden, and it's kind of the opposite. Basically, if a card with hidden is installed, this card cannot take damage from attacks, once again, specifically attacks, as long as other cards are installed that do not have hidden. This, of course, means if all cards installed have hidden, they all can take damage. And if only programs with priority are installed, all of them do still take damage. So yeah, and if both of these are installed, of course, hidden doesn't matter much because we already have priority. And if a card, for some reason, one single card has both hidden and priority, then the hidden is automatically removed. Cards cannot have both hidden and priority. Priority always prioritizes over hidden. So yeah, that's pretty much all the extra card little bonus effects they can have through tags. So I got some cards here we will go over in a little more detail to explain on how to read cards and use their card effects. So let's just begin with this one here, the Double Saber. As we already learned, Energy Saber has the attack command, and it's a simple repetitive thing basically. We already know how this works. However, the Double Saber now has 2 card effects. It's pretty much the same card, but it has this extra line right here, which is an automatic effect. This weapon's attack hits twice. So when you attack with this weapon and it hits, right? So it's not, it doesn't miss because of a card effect or whatever, it hits. Then it hits twice. And this attack, once again, this is like globally for melee and ranged. So if this attack, this was a slash ranged, it would still work, the second effect. And a double hit means you do the damage calculation twice. So you deal critical damage to, then you deal 4 damage to a program, and then you repeat it, do another one. This is basically how you read a simple effect like this. Next up we have a cure here. This one is pretty interesting. It's pretty great because it has a condition in the middle of the card text. So first of all, we have once again these arrow brackets right here with repair. This is another of these repetitive card effects that is just shortened into a little tag right here. And repair simply just means remove damage from. A command like repair to critical damage on an ally Waifur. This means we remove 2 critical damage on 1 ally Waifur. Now, as for wording, There's a reason we have 3 separate little areas. This is because each character has their own cards, their own programs that are installed specifically to them. And when reading a card effect, always read the card effect as if it only refers to the character herself and not the others. So if this card effect were to say repair 2 critical damage on Waifur, or program damage on a program, then that would only mean your character this card is installed to. However, since this card says on an ally Waifur, that means this card has a global effect which can go to any of your characters, since they all are your ally characters. So there's basically 3 different wordings here for if you include the no wording, which is ally, meaning any of your characters or any of their programs. If it says ally Waifur's program, then that means any of the programs. There is also another ally. If the card says another ally, then this card effect would specifically require you to choose one of the other characters that does not have this program installed. So that's why it's called another ally. And finally, there is enemy. If it says enemy, then, well, obviously the effect goes towards one of your enemy characters or programs or whatever it says. Now, this is a manual effect, so you download, install, and then you do the effect. Repair 2 critical damage on an ally Waifur, any of your characters. And then we have this semicolon, I think it's called, which is it basically splits the card effect into another section. So after this, basically imagine if it says then, right? We have now a condition. We have the round brackets, which is a condition. Repaired Waifur has 6+ critical damage. Basically anything that is in these conditions, just imagine it says if, okay? If or when or something like that. This is a condition. So we already did the 2 critical damage heal, and now if the repaired Waifur has 6 or more critical damage, that means if, let's say, she had 8 and you use this to heal her down to 6, she still has the 6 damage, which means the condition is now met, and therefore this bonus effect here also happens. Send this card to cooldown 2. So as we know, cards sent removed from field automatically go to cooldown 3. This card effect, however, allows this card to go to cooldown 2 instead if the condition is met. We also have this thing here. It's a triple red, which means it's a global card effect. This effect will always trigger no matter if the card is disabled or enabled. And it just simply says modify this card's cancel cost by +1. So the card has a cost of 0 + 1, which is a total cost of 1. And if you download this and your opponent wants to cancel it, they would have to have one of their characters pay the total cost, which is 1. However, this global effect increases that cost by +1. Therefore, to cancel this card, your opponent would have to pay 2 instead of just 1. And that's how to read this card, basically. It also has reversal. That means you can use this during your opponent's turn or even in the middle of an attack, just as a quick save, however you like to do this. Next up, we have the chain binding right here. This is one of the level 3 programs. And yes, level 3 programs are generally very overpowered in this game. They are meant to be. They are kind of like the ultimate abilities, which is also why they're limited to 1, just as the character cards level 3 are. But yeah, let's just check it out. We have a virus here. These, by the way, they don't really do much of a difference other than some rules apply only to viruses and so on. And they color code the cards so you know what they are for. And viruses usually have card effects that specifically are directed towards your opponent rather than like buffing yourself, which often these blue cards, the supports are for. And weapons usually have some way of attack, while the skills, as I said, are the like one-shots. Anyway, so we have 3 different automatic effects here. The first one is with a condition, install. Again, this is you read this as a if install, so that means the moment this card is installed, the effect will happen. So you download the card, pay the cost and everything, your opponent may cancel or not or whatever, and then installed. The moment that happens, link to enemy Waifur. You link this card to a specific card mentioned in the card effect. So you install it, and this card is now linked to one enemy Waifur. Of course, you choose which one you want to link to.
Also, if a program is linked to a specific target, if the target is removed from the field, delete the linking program.
And this only happens once when the install happens, because since you cannot reinstall this card afterwards, since it's already installed, the condition only triggers once. Second, we have another card effect, which is without a condition. It says linked Waifur loses all mastery and cannot gain new mastery. Therefore, the character you have linked this card to now no longer has any mastery and cannot gain new mastery either. Therefore, you basically block her or prevent her from using her installs or downloads for cheaper, which is very strong. This card also got buffed for the final version. You can see all the updates and changes on the official website, and of course, the moment the game actually comes out, that's when the cards are final. Anyway, and the third effect, linked Waifur cannot upgrade or cancel. And we already learned what these are. Canceling, well, cancel the download, right? So whoever is linked to this card can no longer cancel, which is very strong. And also cannot upgrade. And upgrading was during your update phase, when you can either summon or upgrade. That character can no longer upgrade either. So if you do this on a level 1 character, she's stuck at level 1, unless, of course, this program is deleted. And finally, let's just take a look at this one here. This is once again a skill, one of these one-shot things. It has static, which doesn't do anything other than apply certain card effects to it. And let's just read what this does. We can already see it has crit and power. That means you already know this card will have some form of attack command. And there it is, attack ranged. It's the other type, but it works the same way as the melee one does. And it's a manual card effect, so when you download this and install, you can now use all the effects, so you can attack, and since it's a skill afterwards, it will deinstall, delete itself. So very simple. We've already gone through how attack works, and now let's look at these two other effects here. The first one here says it's a global effect, so this card effect works even if the card is in your hand, with a condition. 4+ cards with static face up in cooldown. So the condition already says, okay, if 4 or more cards, that's what 4+ stands for, 4 or more cards with static, which is this little tag here. Static, of course, it refers to the tags in the first line. It does not refer to cards that have static somewhere in card text. So it has to be in the first line. 4 or more cards with static are face up in cooldown. Now, cooldown is the entire left side of the field, as we already discussed. So throughout play, you might have some different cards with static in cooldown. Why, I will explain in a second. Let's just say there are some cards there. I'm just going to put 4 of them here. They can be in any cooldown zone. You can even have multiple in one. So now we have 4 cards with static and cooldown. So if this condition is met, which we do have now, the card effect now triggers. Critical +1, of course, this only refers to this card, unless it would say otherwise. So it increases critical by 1, now we have 3 critical power. And a power +5, so this is basically doubled. And gain reversal. So as long as we have 4 cards in here, in total, this card also has the reversal card effect, which is this thing right here. And as we know, if we have reversal, we can use this during your opponent's turn, or even as a quick effect in between. So that is very powerful. And finally, this card, as do pretty much most of the cards that have static, has another card effect that is globally available. It's called, with a condition, deleted. So if this card is deleted, This, of course, specifically is this card, right? It doesn't mean if another card is deleted, that doesn't matter. It has to be this card. Otherwise, it would say if another card is deleted. So if this card is deleted, sent to cooldown as face up. So yeah, specifically this card does not go to cooldown face down as they normally would, because the card effect forces it to go to cooldown as face up after use. And that's how you kind of do the static stuff. There's a lot of mechanics in the game that are similar to this with other rulings and other effects and combinations, and yeah, have fun trying those out. I will do detailed videos on every single character and all their cards and how they specifically exactly work, but generally if you follow this how-to and just simply read the card effects and follow what they say, yeah, you should be able to play the game. And after the action phase is finally over, now we have the turn end, or end phase as other games like to call it, which ends your turn. And finally, we answer the question on how to win a game of Project Waifur. Now, there are 4 methods to do this, starting off with the most common one, which is to reduce your opponent's score to 0 and then dealing 1 more damage to score. We simply reduce our opponent's score by deleting our opponent's characters. Now, let's just say Ram, right now, our character was deleted by our opponent. So, before we do anything with the cards on the board, we simply do a score check. We check if our score is empty or not. If our score is empty, we simply lose the game right then and there. However, if we do have cards in score, we have to do score damage. In which case, we simply look at our character's max level at the time of deletion, which in this case is Ram level 3. We add 1, which makes 4. Therefore, we take 4 cards from score to our hand. After we take cards to our hand, delete or remove all cards from field that are attached to the character that was deleted and send them to cooldown, which means we have to take all the updates, all the upgrades, all cards from cache, as well as all cards from charge, and send them to cooldown. We also delete all cards that are currently installed, which means that all card effects that trigger upon deletion will still trigger. Now, these cards are also of course then sent to cooldown. And then finally, our level 1 character card is not removed from the field, but instead placed face down back into her zone. And as a reminder, you are allowed to place her back face up during your next update phase. And let's just continue and say, okay, next up, Wicked is now deleted. Our opponent deletes Wicked, in which case now we have to do a score check. We look at our character, level 2, we add 1, which is free in total, which means we have to now take free cards from score to our hand. However, score in this case does not have enough cards to take to our hand equal to the amount we have to, so no matter our character level, if we do not have enough cards in score but at least a minimum of 1, we simply take all remaining cards to our hand instead. Then, of course, the entire process of character deletion, deleting all the cards, and this one has a deleted card effect. So this one triggers, place to face up, which is the effect. And then now our score is empty, but we still yet have not lost the game. If our opponent does 1 more deletion, since our score is empty, we simply lose the game. The second method on how to win a game is very simple. If your opponent does not have any active character cards, Waifur cards, on the field, your opponent loses the game. The third method on how to win a game is if you do not have cards in your deck and then have to draw a card but cannot. In that moment, you lose the game. And finally, simply if a card effect states that you have won the game, you win the game. And now you should be able to play Project Waifur. A typical game of Project Waifur takes around 15 to maybe 45 minutes, depending on player skill and of course their decks, completing at around turn 10. While 2 advanced players would only take around 5 to 10 minutes to complete their first 5 turns, as for those 5 turns, both players should be focusing on summoning and charging their characters, drawing cards, and getting their economy going. While around turn 5 or 6, after getting your first escalation, the cooldown to hand, that is where the action begins. Of course, you can find the full rules and all information on all cards in the game, including frequently asked questions and answers, on the official website. Link in the video description. And I'll be seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.